The old pump coughed, a dying gasp of a machine as the last of the murky green water spiraled down the drain. He watched it go, a victorious smile touching his lips. Finally free. He had no idea the sound he heard next. The shriek of a car. Stopping short, the furious slam of a door was the sound of his new life ending. And her voice, a high-pitched wail cutting through the humid air, was a battle cry he was not prepared for. "It's my pool now." The pool, if you could still call it that, was a festering wound in the heart of their new backyard. It wasn't a shimmering oasis, a promise of summer afternoons and cocktail-fueled evenings. It was a swamp, a green, viscous, algae-choked basin that reflected nothing but the bruised blue sky of late autumn and the skeletal branches of the old sycamore tree that loomed over it. Leo stood on the crumbling concrete apron, hands on his hips, his breath misting in the cool air. "It's a hazard, Clara," he said, the words puffing out in a visible cloud. "The kids can't play back here with this thing." His wife, Clara, leaned against the sliding glass door of the living room, a mug of steaming coffee clutched in her hands. She was a woman who saw potential in everything, from the peeling paint on the window frames to the cracked tiles in the kitchen, but even she looked at the pool with a defeated expression. "I know, sweetie. It feels like we're giving up on the dream before we even start." The house, a mid-century rambler with good bones but decades of neglect, had been their forever home fantasy. They'd envisioned a life here. Laughing kids running across a green lawn, garden beds bursting with color, and maybe, one day, a clean, sparkling pool. But the reality was far messier. The pool's pump was rusted solid. The filtration system was a tangle of corroded pipes, and the liner was a patchwork of patches on top of other patches. Every pool guy they'd called had taken one look, shaken his head, and quoted a price that would have bought a new car. "It's not giving up. It's being realistic," Leo replied, walking to the edge and prodding the scum-covered surface with a long stick. A frog, a truly massive specimen, launched itself from the edge and disappeared into the muck with a plop. "This is a public health crisis waiting to happen. The old man, Mr. Abernathy, the realtor, said he let it go for years. Couldn't afford the upkeep. He was a retired engineer, a man who saw problems in logic and order. The pool was an unsolvable problem with a simple solution. Remove it. Fill it in. Turn the space into a garden or a fire pit area. It was the only way forward." The next day, he rented a powerful submersible pump and a long, thick hose. As he was setting it up, a woman emerged from the house next door. She was a woman in her late 40s, with a perfectly coiffed blonde bob, an aggressively bright smile, and a pink cardigan draped over her shoulders. She strode across her immaculately manicured lawn with a purpose that made Leo uneasy. "Oh, you must be the new owners," she chirped, stopping at the shared property line. "I'm Brenda Matthews." Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, which were a piercing, judgmental blue. "Hi, I'm Leo. This is my wife, Clara." Leo gestured vaguely toward the house, already sensing a lecture was coming. "Yes, I know," Brenda said, her smile tightening. "I saw you moving in. Welcome to the neighborhood. I have to say, I was worried sick about this house after poor Mr. Abernathy passed. It really fell into disrepair." Her gaze drifted to the pool and a flicker of something. Disapproval? "Ownership?" crossed her face. "Are you doing something with the pool?" "Yeah, we're draining it," Leo said, getting straight to the point. "It's in pretty bad shape. We're going to fill it in." Brenda's smile vanished, replaced by a look of profound horror. "Fill it in? Oh, but you can't do that. That's simply not an option." Leo stared at her, dumbfounded. "I'm sorry, but it's our pool, on our property. It's not safe." "I know what it is, dear," Brenda said, her voice dropping a register, becoming condescending and clipped. I've spent the last 6 years taking care of it for Mr. Abernathy. I was a godsend to him, really. He couldn't handle the upkeep, so I did it. I came over every week to skim the leaves, add chemicals. It was a joint effort, a neighborhood amenity. We had an understanding. She paused, a glint of triumph in her eye. He said I was the keeper of the pool. It's practically mine. Leo felt a cold chill run down his spine. The word keeper echoed in his head. He had no idea what this woman was talking about. Brenda, with all due respect, that's not how property ownership works. We bought the house, we bought the pool, the title is clear. There was no easement, no legal agreement. Brenda laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. Oh, honey, we don't need a legal document for everything, do we? Not when you have a verbal agreement between good neighbors. Mr. Abernathy was a man of his word. He gave me perpetual access. This is just unconscionable. You're destroying a neighborhood asset. Leo tried to reason with her, but it was like talking to a brick wall. Brenda wasn't listening. She was just talking, her voice growing louder and more frantic. You can't do this! I was planning on having the kids over for a pool party next summer. This is an outrage! She turned on her heel and stomped back to her house, muttering, under her breath about new people and entitlement. Clara came outside, her face a mask of concern. What was all that about? She thinks the pool belongs to her, Leo said, shaking his head in disbelief. Or that she has some kind of permanent, eternal right to it because she cared for it for the previous owner. That's insane, Clara said, but there was a tremor in her voice. They had spent their life savings on this house. The last thing they needed was a legal battle with their new neighbor. The next few days were a blur of minor aggressions. Brenda's complaints became a daily ritual. She'd stand on her lawn, arms crossed, watching them work. She called the city to complain about the noise of their rented power washer. She placed a small hand-painted wooden sign on their shared property line that simply read, "Pool Crossing." It was bizarre, petty, and unnerving. Leo tried to ignore it all, focusing on the work. He had a project, a goal. The day he set up the pump and started draining the pool felt like a liberation. The machine hummed to life, and the first trickle of green, sludgy water began its long journey through the hose, out onto the street and down the storm drain. For hours, he watched, mesmerized by the slow, inexorable process. The water level dropped inch by inch, revealing layers of filth, discarded toys, and decades of forgotten debris. It was disgusting, but also deeply satisfying. This was him taking back control, reclaiming a space that had been held hostage by neglect, and now a delusional neighbor. He was in the deep end, wearing waders, pulling up clumps of saturated leaves, and the ancient, brittle remains of a pool cover when he heard it. The pump, a low, steady drone for hours, suddenly fell silent. He pulled his headphones off and felt the sudden, shocking quiet. He looked up, and his blood ran cold. Brenda stood at the edge of the pool, her hands on her hips, her face a mask of incandescent fury. She had unplugged the pump. "What in the hell are you doing, Brenda?" Leo yelled, his voice echoing in the cavernous space of the half-empty pool. "You're not going to do this!" she seethed, her eyes wide with a manic intensity he had never seen before. "You're not going to destroy my pool. I won't allow it." "Your pool? It's not your pool. Get off my property and leave this alone." Leo scrambled out of the pool, his waders slick and heavy. He strode toward the outlet and plugged the pump back in. The machine sputtered back to life, and Brenda recoiled as if she'd been electrocuted. "Fine!" she screamed, her face contorting with rage. "Fine! I'm calling the police! They'll deal with this!" Leo just stared at her, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "Do it. Call them. I'm sure they'll love to hear your story about how my pool is yours." He didn't actually think she would. It was just a hollow threat, the last gasp of a desperate person. But 10 minutes later, he heard the faint, distant wail of sirens. They grew closer, a rising tide of sound that stopped right in front of their house. Two uniformed officers, a younger man and an older woman with a no-nonsense expression, walked up the driveway. Brenda was right behind them, pointing a trembling finger at the pool. "That's him. That's the man who's destroying my pool. I told you. I told him not to, but he wouldn't listen," she screeched, her voice cracking with manufactured hysteria. Leo walked up to them, trying to keep his voice calm and steady. "Officers, thank you for coming. I can explain this. This woman, my neighbor, Brenda, is under the impression that she has some kind of ownership over this swimming pool on my property. We just bought this house. We're draining the pool because it's a total wreck and a safety hazard. She's been harassing us all week, and now she's unplugged my equipment and called the police with this ridiculous claim." The older officer, her name tag reading Sergeant Ramirez, turned her cool, assessing gaze from Leo to Brenda. "Ma'am, is that correct? You're claiming this is your pool?" "Yes. Well, not mine exactly, but it was my responsibility. Mr. Abernathy, the man who lived here before, he gave me care rights. It was a verbal agreement. He said I was the keeper of the pool, and I would have access to it whenever I wanted as long as I kept it nice. This is an act of destruction." Brenda was almost crying now, her voice a desperate, theatrical plea. The younger officer, Officer Miller, stifled a small smirk. "Ma'am, a verbal agreement with—" The wail of the police sirens faded into the distance, leaving behind a silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight on Leo's chest. He and Clara stood in the twilight of their yard, the half-drained pool a gaping maw between them. The air was cool, but a knot of cold dread had formed in Leo's stomach and was rapidly spreading. He watched Brenda, the smug, triumphant curve of her lips visible even in the low light. She gave them one last withering glare, a queen surveying her conquered territory, before she turned and disappeared into the sanctuary of her pristine house. "What just happened?" Clara whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. "A note. An old, handwritten note. How can that possibly be enough?" Leo ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. "I don't know. He said it was a claim, a written claim, that it complicates things." He looked at the pool, its waterline a jagged, uneven testament to their halted progress. The pump was silent, a useless hunk of plastic. The hose, snaked across the lawn, looked like a dead snake. The dream of their forever home had just cracked, and through the fissure, a venomous, legal nightmare was slithering in. The police had left them in a state of suspended animation, victims of a nebulous, unofficial court order delivered by a cop on a Tuesday afternoon. The next day, a grim, sleepless haze settled over the house. The kids, sensing the tension, stayed, quiet, playing in their rooms. The once exciting project of renovating their home had been replaced by a crushing sense of paralysis. The sound of the pump, once a symbol of progress, was now a forbidden memory. They spent the morning on the phone, a frenzied, desperate search for a lawyer who could make sense of this. They finally landed on a man named Howard Miller, a family law attorney with a dry wit and an office cluttered with old legal tomes. They sat opposite his massive mahogany desk, the note from Mr. Abernathy photocopied and laid out between them like an ancient, damning scroll. "It's not worth the paper it's printed on, legally speaking," Howard said, adjusting his glasses. "No consideration, not notarized, no legal description of the property. It's nonsense. However," he paused, his expression turning serious. "However, a good lawyer on her side could argue for a temporary injunction. A judge might see a reasonable dispute and halt your work to avoid irreversible damage. You drain it, you fill it in, and then she wins her case. The damage is already done. It's a classic tactic. She's not trying to win the pool. Not really. She's trying to win the fight. She's trying to punish you." The word punish hung in the air, a cold confirmation of Leo's worst fears. This wasn't about a pool. It was about control, entitlement, and a profound, unexplained anger directed at them for simply buying a house. Howard's retainer fee, a number that seemed astronomical, was the first real consequence of Brenda's actions. They wrote the check, their hands trembling, a significant chunk of their renovation budget vanishing into the ether. The lawyer's advice was simple. Cease all work. Avoid contact with her at all costs. Anything you say or do can and will be used against you. Don't antagonize her. Don't give her a reason to claim harassment. We'll draft a letter and get the ball rolling. But Brenda, it turned out, was not interested in being avoided. The following afternoon, Leo looked out the kitchen window and saw her in their backyard. She was standing on the concrete apron of the pool, armed with a leaf blower. She didn't look at him. She didn't acknowledge his existence. She just went about her business, blowing a massive pile of dead sycamore leaves from her side of the yard directly into their pool. Leo's blood ran hot. He felt an incandescent rage bubbling up inside him. This was a deliberate act of sabotage, a direct violation of their property. He wanted to go out there, to yell, to demand she stop. But Howard's words echoed in his head. Avoid contact. Don't antagonize her. He watched, his hands balled into fists, as she finished her work and walked away, a satisfied smirk on her face. The half-drained pool, now filled with a rotting blanket of leaves, looked more pathetic than ever. It was a tangible symbol of their powerlessness. Over the next few weeks, the situation escalated. Brenda seemed to relish her newfound authority. She put up a small, flimsy white picket fence on the property line. On it, she hung a hand-painted wooden sign that read, "Private Pool Access." She'd stand on her lawn and watch them, her gaze like a physical weight. One afternoon, Clara came home to find a bag of used pool noodles, stained and mildewed, propped up against their front door with a note that said, "For when you get it running again." The harassment was petty, calculated, and utterly demoralizing. The dream home was becoming a cage. The pool, a constant stinking reminder of their legal purgatory, dominated their lives. The legal fees mounted, and the tension between Leo and Clara became a living, breathing thing in their house. "We shouldn't have bought this place," Clara said one night, the words quiet and sharp as shards of glass. "We should have stayed in the city. At least there, our neighbor wasn't a crazy person who thinks she owns our backyard." "You think I didn't see the warning signs?" Leo shot back, his voice rising. "She seemed weird, but I didn't think she was a complete psychopath. And you wanted this place just as much as I did. We're in this together, Clara." The argument died with a bitter, simmering silence. They were united against Brenda, but the fight was wearing them down, turning them against each other. One rainy Saturday, Leo was cleaning out the garage, a task he'd been putting off. The garage was a cluttered mausoleum of Mr. Abernathy's life, filled with old gardening tools, brittle cardboard boxes, and a musty smell that clung to everything. Pushed into a far corner, under a pile of paint cans, he found a battered leather-bound photo album. He pulled it out, blowing a thick layer of dust off the cover. He didn't know why he opened it. Maybe it was a distraction from the misery outside. Inside, he found a different story of the man who had lived in their house. Pictures of a younger, vibrant Mr. Abernathy. Pictures of a woman Leo didn't recognize. And then he saw her. Brenda. She was younger, her blonde bob less aggressive, her smile more genuine. The photos showed her and Mr. Abernathy together. Not just standing at the property line, but sitting on a park bench, her head on his shoulder. At a dinner table, laughing together. One photo, taken in what looked like the living room of their house, showed them holding hands, 2 glasses of wine on the coffee table. The picture was dated 2 years ago. Leo's blood ran cold. This wasn't a platonic, neighborly relationship. They were a couple. Or they had been. He flipped through more pictures, his heart hammering in his chest. Brenda was everywhere. The pool, the yard, inside the house. This changed everything. The note, the keeper's rights, the profound anger. It wasn't the madness of a Karen. It was the grief and fury of a woman who felt she had been robbed of something deeply personal. He found Clara and showed her the album, his voice a strained whisper as he explained. "This isn't about a pool, Clara. This is about them. They were together. She's not fighting for a pool. She's fighting for her memory of him." "This doesn't make it okay," Clara said, her voice quiet but firm. "She's still harassing us. She's still lying. She's making our lives miserable. But it does explain it. It makes her actions feel less random, more intentional." Against the advice of his lawyer, Leo knew he had to confront her. He needed to understand the truth, to break through her facade of entitled neighbor and get to the real reason for her hatred. He took the photo album and walked over to her house, his heart pounding a furious rhythm against his ribs. He knocked on her front door. The door opened and Brenda appeared, her face a mask of annoyance. "I told you not to bother me. Your lawyer will be hearing from mine." "I'm not here as a neighbor or a legal adversary, Brenda," Leo said, holding up the photo album. "I'm here because I found this, and I think we need to talk about Mr. Abernathy." The color drained from her face. She took a half step back, her eyes darting from his face to the album. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me. I saw the pictures. You two were a couple. He didn't give you keeper's rights to the pool out of neighborly love. He did it because it was a place you shared, a symbol. I need you to tell me what's going on." The mask of anger and entitlement shattered. Her composure broke, and for a moment he saw the raw pain underneath. Her eyes welled with tears, and her lip trembled. "He was my life," she choked out, her voice ragged with emotion. "He was my life, and you took it away. You just came in and bulldozed over everything we had." "We didn't know," Clara said, who had followed Leo over, her voice softer than his. "We had no idea." "He was sick," Brenda whispered, the tears now streaming down her face. "He was so sick. He made a promise. He said this house, this pool, it would be ours, that we would live here together forever. He didn't get a chance to change his will. His nephew, that greedy monster, came in and took everything. He told me there was nothing for me. He just sold the house from under me." Her words hit Leo and Clara with the force of a physical blow. The note was a lie. Not the note itself, but the story she had woven around it. The truth was something far more complicated, a tragedy of betrayal and grief. Brenda was a woman who had been robbed of her home, her partner, and her future. "His nephew sold the house to you," she continued, her voice filled with a desperate, venomous conviction. "And he sold it knowing." The air was thick with the silent echoes of Brenda's confession and the crushing weight of the document Leo now held. The codicil, notarized and formal, felt like a bomb in his hands. It wasn't a flimsy note from a senile man. It was a promise, made and sealed, a legal contract that should have been honored. Brenda stood on her doorstep, her rage and grief having given way to a brittle, exhausted silence. We had no idea," Clara said again, the words feeling inadequate and small. Brenda just shook her head, a tear tracing a clean line through the smudges of dirt on her cheek. "Of course you didn't. He made sure no one would. He's a monster." She looked at the paper in Leo's hand. He thought he had destroyed the only copy. Leo and Clara returned to their house, their minds reeling. The half-drained pool, now a bog of leaves and stagnant water, was no longer just a source of frustration. It was a crime scene, a monument to a fraud that had entangled them, an innocent couple who just wanted a nice house, in a legal battle of monumental proportions. The simple dream of a new home had been supplanted by the terror of losing it all. The next morning, they met with their lawyer, Howard Miller. He listened to their story, his face impassive, as Leo slid the codicil across his desk. Howard put on his glasses and read the document, and the change in his demeanor was immediate and startling. His initial skepticism about Brenda was replaced by a grim, focused intensity. This is a game changer," he said, his voice low. "This changes everything. Your purchase of the house could be declared null and void. The deed could be invalid. You could lose the house entirely." The words hit them like a physical blow. Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Lose the house! The phrase was an echo of a phantom fear that had now taken solid form. "So what do we do?" Leo asked, his voice strained. "We just pack up and leave?" "No," Howard said firmly. "We fight. This isn't just a property dispute anymore. This is a case of real estate fraud. The seller, Mr. Abernathy's nephew, was legally obligated to disclose this document. He sold you a property with a significant and unaddressed claim on it. You have grounds for a lawsuit. The title company, the listing agent, they're all going to be involved." The legal battle they had been dreading had now become an all-out war, and they were caught in the crossfire. Howard advised them to start with the most obvious target, the nephew, the man who had sold them their house. They had his name from the closing documents, Mark Abernathy. With a new sense of purpose, Leo and Clara went back to the only person who had the key to this whole mess, Brenda. Walking across the lawn to her house no longer felt like a confrontation. It felt like a mission. Brenda opened her door, her eyes red-rimmed but her posture straight. The bitterness was still there, but now it was tempered with a deep sorrow. "We need your help, Brenda," Leo said, getting straight to the point. "We believe you. We believe Mark Abernathy defrauded us all, but we need you to work with us. We need to find proof. We need to find out why he did this and where he hid the money." Brenda looked at them, her gaze hard and assessing. "You believe me now? After I spent weeks trying to warn you? After you called the police on me? You think I'm just going to join forces with you?" "We were wrong," Clara said, her voice sincere. "We judged you based on what we saw, and we apologize. But right now, we're all victims here. He stole your inheritance and our home. We want to get justice for you and for Mr. Abernathy. And for us." The sincerity in Clara's voice seemed to crack Brenda's defenses. She paused, considering their words. "All right," she finally said, her voice quiet. "I'll help you. For Martin, not for you. We need to find everything he hid. He was a good man. He deserves to have his wishes honored." Their unlikely alliance was formed. The three of them, a mismatched team of angry homeowners and a heartbroken former partner, began their investigation. Brenda provided them with a treasure trove of information. She had boxes of Martin Abernathy's old bank statements, letters, and personal documents. It was a gold mine of evidence. They spent the next week poring over the documents in their living room, the space that was supposed to be a place of joy, now a makeshift war room. They discovered a pattern of financial manipulation. In the months leading up to Mr. Abernathy's death, large sums of money had been transferred out of his accounts and into one named Abernathy Investments. A separate check from a bank they couldn't identify was made out to Mark Abernathy for an amount almost equal to the difference between the house's market value and the price Leo and Clara had paid. Mark had seemingly cooked the books. Brenda, with her deep knowledge of Martin's life, also revealed a crucial detail. Mark was not close to his uncle. Martin had disowned him years ago. He was a real estate broker, a slick talker. He only showed up when Martin got sick. He manipulated his way into the will, and then he stole everything he could. He was always asking about the house, the value. He even told Martin he would sell it and put the money in a trust for him. The picture became clear. Mark had preyed on his dying uncle, gained control of his finances, and then, after discovering the codicil, had sold the house to Leo and Clara in a fraudulent, hurried sale, pocketing a significant sum of money and leaving Brenda and the codicil in the dust. He had assumed that Brenda, a grieving, elderly woman, would never fight back. The time had come to confront him. Howard had advised against it, urging them to let the legal system handle it, but Leo felt a need to look the man in the eye. With Brenda's knowledge, they found Mark's office, a slick, modern space in a high-rise office building. The sign on the door read, "Abernathy Realty, your dream, our mission." The irony was not lost on them. The three of them walked into his office, a phalanx of silent fury. Mark was a man in his late 30s with a perfectly tailored suit and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He looked up from his desk, and his face, initially a mask of professional politeness, went rigid with recognition. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Brenda, I told you I would have you arrested if you showed up here." He looked at Leo and Clara. "And you? You're harassing her now? This is a new low." "No," Leo said, his voice flat. "We're here to talk about your uncle and the house you sold us." "There's nothing to talk about," Mark said, leaning back in his chair, a bored look on his face. "The house was sold legally, the estate was settled, and Brenda here has no legal claim to anything. She's a delusional old woman who thinks my uncle was going to marry her." "He was my partner," Brenda shrieked, the pain in her voice cutting through the slick veneer of the office. "He loved me, and he gave me the pool. You know he did. He left me a codicil." Mark laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "The codicil? Oh, that ridiculous piece of paper. He was old, Brenda. He wrote all kinds of nonsense. It wasn't a real document. I took care of that. I burned the original myself. It's gone. It never existed." The blood drained from Mark's face as soon as the words left his mouth. The smug, condescending smile fell away, replaced by dawning horror. His eyes flickered from Brenda's stunned face to Leo's, then to Clara's. He had just admitted it. He had just confessed. The casual admission, meant to be a final crushing blow to Brenda's hopes, was instead a verbal admission of guilt. He knew about the codicil. He had destroyed the original. He had committed fraud. The room was silent, save for the hum of the air conditioning. The powerful beat of the moment was the silent, shared understanding between the three of them. Mark Abernathy had just proven their case for them. The game was over. The battle for the pool, for the house, for justice, had just turned on a single, careless and devastatingly stupid slip of the tongue. The silence in Mark Abernathy's pristine office was a living, breathing thing. Mark's face, pale and slick with a sudden sweat, was a portrait of a man who had just dug his own grave with a single careless word. He tried to speak, to conjure, a lie, a denial, anything, but the words died in his throat. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, his eyes wide and darting. "I meant I had it in my hands. I was going to give it to her. I never said I destroyed it." Leo smiled, a cold, hard expression that felt alien on his face. "Yes, you did, Mark. You said, 'I burned the original myself.' We have an admission of guilt. We have a notarized codicil. We have a fraud case so clear even a blind man could see it, and you know it." The power had shifted. The man who had held their lives in his slick, polished hands was now at their mercy. Leo felt an intoxicating surge of adrenaline. This wasn't about a pool anymore. This was about justice. Clara, who had been a silent observer, stepped forward. "This is a choice, Mark. We can walk out of here right now, go to the police with this document and your verbal confession. Your career is over. You'll be facing jail time, or we can make a deal, right here, right now." Mark's arrogance, his carefully constructed persona of a successful real estate agent, crumbled. He slumped back in his chair, a defeated man. "What deal? What do you want?" "We want justice," Brenda said, her voice shaking with a righteous fury. "We want what was promised to me, and we want to be made whole." The negotiation was a tense, hours-long affair. They called Howard. their lawyer, and put him on speakerphone. Howard, hearing the desperation in Mark's voice, dictated a list of demands that was mercilessly direct. First, Mark would pay for the complete professional draining and filling of the pool, a cost that, due to the delay and the biohazard, had skyrocketed. Second, he would reimburse Leo and Clara for all their legal fees, including the retainer. Third, he would sign a formal, legal document acknowledging the codicil and ceding the pool area to Brenda. Fourth, and most importantly, he would provide a financial settlement to Brenda, honoring the intent of Mr. Abernathy's will. Mark fought them on every point, his slick lawyer's jargon and threats of countersuits his only remaining weapons. But they had the trump card. Every time he pushed back, Leo would simply hold up his phone, as if to call the police. The threat was real, and Mark, who understood legal consequences better than anyone, knew he was trapped. Finally, in a fit of rage and resignation, he agreed. He was a cornered animal, and the only way out was to comply. The agreement was ironclad, drafted by Howard and signed with an air of profound defeat. Mark's signature was a testament to his legal and moral ruin. Over the next few weeks, the agreement was executed. The money for the legal fees and the pool remediation was wired to Leo and Clara's account. It felt surreal, like a lottery win that had been won through sheer misery. The funds for Brenda's settlement were also transferred. She now owned a small, irregular rectangle of land at the back of their property, a plot that held a half-drained, algae-filled hole. It was a strange, emotional victory. The pool was no longer a symbol of their legal purgatory. It became a symbol of a strange, twisted kind of justice. Brenda, who had gone from antagonist to reluctant ally, finally started to heal. With the settlement money, she hired an architect to design a small, elegant garden on her new plot, a memorial to the man she had loved. She even apologized to Leo and Clara, a quiet, sincere moment that finally broke the last remnants of the wall between them. Mark, on the other hand, was a ghost. The word of his deceit had spread through the local real estate community like wildfire. His phone stopped ringing. His signs were pulled from lawns. He was a pariah, a cautionary tale whispered at open houses. He was ruined. But then, one rainy afternoon, after the workers had finally finished draining the last of the foul water and were preparing to fill it in, Leo received a call. It was Mark, his voice not arrogant and slick, but a desperate, panicked whisper. "You don't understand," Mark said, his voice cracking with fear. "The codicil wasn't just a piece of paper I destroyed for profit. I was in deep. I needed that money. My business was a front. I owe a lot of very bad people a lot of money." Leo's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about? The men I owe, they're not from the bank. They're not from a loan shark. They're connected. They came to me when I started getting behind on my debts. They offered a way out. They funnel money through my business, and I sell it as quickly as I can. They were going to come for me. I needed that money from the house sale to pay them off. I thought it was enough. I thought I was free." Leo felt a knot form in his stomach. The satisfaction of victory evaporated, replaced by a cold dread. This wasn't just greed. It was a desperate act of a man caught in a much larger, more dangerous web. "The money you took from me, from the settlement, that was my last chance. Now they know I don't have it, and they know why. They know I sold the house to you, and that you and Brenda are the reason I can't pay them." A chill ran down Leo's spine. The story had just expanded beyond their wildest nightmares. They weren't just fighting a crooked real estate agent anymore. They were now on the radar of dangerous criminals. That night, as the streetlights came on, casting a soft orange glow over their newly quiet neighborhood, a long black SUV with tinted windows rolled slowly down their street. It was a jarringly out-of-place vehicle in their quiet, suburban cul-de-sac. It passed Brenda's house, its headlights sweeping across the small garden she was building, and then slowed to a near stop directly in front of Leo and Clara's house. The car's progress, was deliberate, unnervingly slow. A faceless, shadowy figure behind the tinted glass stared directly at the half-filled pool pit, an empty space that now represented not just a financial loss, but a life-threatening debt. The SUV then moved on, disappearing into the night, leaving behind a silence far more terrifying than the shouting and legal threats of the past few weeks. Leo and Clara looked at each other, their faces pale in the dim light of the living room. They had won. The pool was theirs, the money was in the bank, and justice had been served. But a new, far more sinister threat had just arrived at their doorstep. They had solved one problem, only to discover a much bigger, more terrifying one looming just beyond the horizon. The peace they had so desperately fought for was, in fact, an illusion. Their victory had brought them into a world they were not prepared for. The black SUV was gone, a phantom on a quiet street. But the silence it left behind was a hollow, ringing terror that seeped into the very foundation of the house. Leo and Clara stood by their living room window, their hands linked, the comfortable warmth of their skin a desperate counterpoint to the cold dread settling in their bones. Brenda was at her own window, a single flickering light in her house a testament to her shared vigil. The pool, a half-filled pit of dirt, was no longer a symbol of a legal fight. It was a beacon, a target. The next morning, Leo, driven by a primal need to protect his family, called Howard Miller. The lawyer's normally calm voice was edged with a newfound urgency. "Do not go to the police. Not yet," Howard instructed. "You have no proof, just a panicked phone call from a crook. You'll only draw attention to yourselves. I have a contact, a private investigator, an ex-cop named Marcus Thorne. He's the best at this kind of thing. I'm sending him your way. He can get you answers without putting your lives on a bulletin board." The PI arrived an hour later, a man as hard and weathered as granite, with a pair of intense, world-weary eyes. He listened to the entire story, from the codicil to the SUV, his expression never changing. Mark Abernathy wasn't a small-time crook, the PI said, leaning forward. He was a conduit, a money-laundering funnel. That money he took from the house sale wasn't just debt. It was cash flow for an operation. And the people he owes, they don't forgive debt. They collect it. And they don't care who they collect it from. The PI laid out the chilling reality. Leo, Clara, and Brenda were not just victims of a fraud, they were now loose ends in a criminal enterprise. They had possession of Mark's money, and in doing so had disrupted a much larger machine. Saturday. Following day, the machine came knocking. It wasn't the police. It was a clean-cut man in a suit, with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. He introduced himself as Mr. Sterling, a representative for a client who had a small business matter to settle. He was cordial, polite, and terrifying. "We understand you have come into possession of some assets that belong to our client," Mr. Sterling said, his eyes scanning the room, taking in every detail. "My client is a very reasonable man. We're not asking for the full amount. Just enough to show us you're not a problem. You keep the house, you keep your lives. The pool, however, that's a different story." He nodded toward the now half-filled pit in the backyard. "That's a problem. Our client wants that space. He wants you to fill it in with something specific. And once that's done, we can all go on our merry way." The subtle threat hung in the air. They could become a part of the criminal enterprise, or they could become another body in the pool. Leo's heart hammered against his ribs. It was blackmail, a terrifying form of extortion that left them with no good options. Just as Mr. Sterling was about to leave, a commotion from the back of the house drew their attention. Brenda, who had been quietly listening in from the periphery, suddenly burst into the room, her face pale, but her eyes alight with a frantic energy. "I know what you're doing," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Mr. Sterling. "You're Trying to use our pool. You're trying to use it to hide something, Martin told me. He told me to watch out for you. Mr. Sterling's smile vanished, replaced by a cold fury. Who is this woman? He hissed. Get her out of here. He was an old man, Brenda continued, ignoring him. He was a former federal agent. He was building a case against you. He knew you would come for him. He knew you would try to use his land, his pool, for your filthy business. The air in the room grew heavy. Brenda's revelation, a wild-sounding declaration, suddenly clicked into place. Mr. Abernathy wasn't a senile old man. He was a clever retired agent who had seen this coming. There's a safe, Brenda blurted out, her mind working furiously. There's a safe in the wall of the pool. He showed me. He said it was for an emergency. He said to only open it if the wrong people showed up. The PI, Marcus Thorne, shot a look at Leo. The pieces were all falling into place. The meticulously planned codicil, the handwritten note, all a deliberate, intricate ruse to keep Brenda and the property safe from Mark, while also creating an insurance policy against the true villains. Mr. Sterling, now realizing the gravity of the situation, pulled a small pistol from his jacket. You open that safe, he said, his voice a low growl, and you hand over whatever is inside, or I will end this right now. Leo, his heart in his throat, knew there was no choice. He ran to the backyard, Brenda and Clara close behind. They scrambled down into the newly filled pit of dirt. Brenda, her hands flying, pointed to a small, barely visible outline on the concrete wall of the deep end, now partially covered by soil. Here! It's here! She cried. Leo, his adrenaline surging, began to dig, his hands clawing at the earth. He uncovered a small, rusted metal plate. It was a door, a hidden compartment built into the very structure of the pool. He yanked it open and, inside, illuminated by the last light of the setting sun, was a waterproof box. He pulled it out, and as he did, he heard the back door of the house burst open. Mr. Sterling and his men were upon them. Hand it over. Sterling roared, leveling the pistol at Leo. Just then the sound of sirens, loud and clear, filled the air. Marcus Thorne, the PI, had been a step ahead, having called in a favor the moment he saw Mr. Sterling's car. Dozens of police cars. And federal agents swarmed the property, their guns drawn, their tactical gear a stark contrast to the quiet suburban street. Mr. Sterling and his men were apprehended. The waterproof box was taken into evidence. Inside, the PI later told them, was a treasure trove of evidence, meticulously detailed ledgers, hard drives with encrypted data, and audio recordings. Everything needed to bring down Mr. Sterling's entire organization. Mr. Abernathy, it turned out, had not only built a beautiful life with Brenda, he had also built a fortress of evidence against the very evil that had threatened to consume it. The final scene took place weeks later. The yard was now a quiet, serene space. The pool, once a source of bitter conflict and then terrifying danger, was gone. In its place, a large rectangular patch of rich, dark earth. Leo, Clara, and Brenda stood over the plot, no longer adversaries or even reluctant allies, but a new, strange kind of family. They had come full circle. They had fought over a pool, and in doing so, they had exposed a criminal conspiracy, found justice for a man's memory, and forged a bond stronger than any legal contract. Brenda, her eyes misting with tears of profound relief and gratitude, held out a small packet of seeds. Marigolds, she said. He always loved marigolds. Said they were a symbol of new beginnings. Leo took the packet, and together the three of them, a hand in the dirt, planted the first seeds of their new life. The ground that had once been a pit of green, stagnant water and a symbol of all their troubles was now a promise. A promise of a beautiful garden, a life finally at peace, and a testament to the idea that sometimes justice doesn't come from a judge. It comes from a brave woman with a codicil, a hidden safe, and the memory of a man who loved her enough to leave her an entire new beginning.